I would like to welcome everybody to Nashville and the Sunset Grill as we open the first ever NORML Southeastern Regional Conference. My name is Sabrina Fendrick. I am the Southeastern Regional Coordinator at National NORML in Washington, D.C. People have come from all over the Southeast. We have people from Atlanta, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Alabama, all over, and it's really exciting to see people come together. As we all know, in November election, Colorado and Washington did something absolutely historic and legalized marijuana for recreational use. The South is very important historically in terms of marijuana. The first laws in our country regarding marijuana were in Jamestown, mandating that everybody grow hemp in the Jamestown colony. Hemp grows wild in Tennessee and Kentucky. We had jazz musicians smoking marijuana in New Orleans. The South has so much rich history with regards to marijuana and hemp, and it's important to start recognizing this.
I will take that. This is we're going to be talking about hemp. Sabrina mentioned that we're part of the hemp belt. Kentucky is more well known as being one of the biggest growers of hemp back in the day. But here in Tennessee, this whole region of the country, we have a lot of out of work tobacco farmers, a lot of fallow land that's not being grown, and I personally think Tennessee, Kentucky, the hemp belt should go back to work growing industrial hemp, and that's a little bit about what I want to tell you guys. If anybody wants to see this, this is called a hempery. And these were what founded America. We started growing hemp before, with the colonists brought it over, and it was mandated by law to be grown, and it's a fabulous crop. But if you haven't seen an actual hempery before, this is what I'm hoping to get back here in the state and across the country. I probably will need the mic.
Hey there. I'm really, really proud of Tennessee and proud of the South for pulling this together. We have a lot of activists who have organized themselves. Several are in this room today, and there's a lot to be proud of. And I just want to welcome you all personally to our great city of Nashville, Tennessee, because it's an honor to be here and have you guys sharing this event. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of the letter that I wrote to President Obama, who I haven't gotten a chance to meet with personally yet, but we're working on that. The reason I'm talking about hemp today is that here in the South, we're obviously a lot further behind in this conversation than people in Colorado and Washington and California. There's a lot of paranoia, there's a lot of misunderstanding here about the marijuana laws. And therefore I think it's important to go back to the beginning so that people understand why and how marijuana was made illegal essentially in 1937. And when you study the history of this, it has a lot to do with hemp. So I'm going to read you a little bit of this letter that I wrote to the president. I've seen the future and it's in the past. A past that included laws mandating all American farmers to grow hemp. A past where hemp was a currency and you could, in fact, as a farmer, pay your taxes in hemp. Wouldn't it be great if we could just roll up a truck this year and offload our taxes in big hemp bales? Our founding fathers considered hemp to be this nation's most valuable crop. This is a quote from Thomas Jefferson. Hemp is the first necessity to the wealth and protection of the country. Make the most of the hemp seed and sow it everywhere. That was George Washington. Our founding fathers knew that hemp helped win our independence from Britain, for it made the ropes and sails and clothing we needed to fight for our freedom. We've always had the ability in America to farm our way to energy independence. We can grow our own fuel. We have the ability right now to run our cars on hemp ethanol and methanol for as low as 50 cents a gallon. We can create our own economic prosperity while guaranteeing national security. We are the only industrialized country in the world that does not legally grow its own hemp. Consequently, we are getting left in the dust on a multi-billion-dollar industry. Many of you out there today think that medical marijuana is still federally illegal in this country because it's a Schedule I drug with no medicinal value. And that is indeed a lie. Marijuana was made illegal in this country in 1937 because hemp threatened the profits of the major industrialists of the time. Rudolph Diesel created his first diesel engine to run on hemp, and that threatened Rockefeller's Standard Oil. The superior hemp pulp threatened the Hearst lumber monopoly, and their newspapers printed on wood pulp. DuPont had created nylon, and hemp threatened their interest. You throw in the alcohol lobbyists, cartels, and special interest groups, and you've got the 1937 Marijuana Tax Stamp Act. And you're looking at the greatest heist of an essential resource in U.S. history. Now, what's fascinating when you look at the history of hemp is that these guys, first of all, they changed the name from cannabis to marijuana, which was confusing. They didn't involve anybody in the AMA, in the medical community. They did these secret board meetings for 2 years. They went through the House and Ways Means Committee because they knew if they did that, it would go straight to the Senate. They bypassed everybody. They presented it, and you have to keep in mind that Hearst was printing all of these really horrible things in his newspapers about how smoking pot would make you go insane. It's all that, reefer madness shit, and everybody was buying into it, but it spent 90 seconds on the Congress floor before it was passed and the tax stamp was passed, virtually making it illegal. So that was all fine and good. It's supposed to make you crazy and everything else, but then World War II came along, and all of a sudden the U.S. government was like, whoops, I think we need this stuff again. So we are going to, so soon after the passage of the Marijuana Tax Stamp Act of 1937, the world would be in the throes of World War II. After Japan had cut off foreign suppliers of hemp to the U.S. in 1942, there was a bizarre and sudden change in U.S. policy. They welcomed hemp for victory. So just 5 years after hemp was essentially made illegal as an addictive and deadly murder, violence, and insanity-inducing narcotic, the U.S. government adjusted this policy so we could secure enough of this vital raw material that was so desperately needed for the war effort. In 1942, hemp suddenly became safe enough for our government to ask children in Kentucky 4-H clubs to grow 1/2 to 2 acres of hemp per child for the nation's 1943 seed supply. And the U.S. government required all American farmers to attend viewings of the USDA film Hemp for Victory. So it became legalized again. These patriotic farmers continued to grow hemp until 1945, when the special tax stamps and registration forms stopped being issued. In 1948, you remember Harry J. Anslinger, he testified to a strongly anti-communist Congress that marijuana rendered its users so peaceful and pacifistic that communists would use it to weaken our soldiers' will to fight and could win if we went to war with them. So he basically used the exact opposite reasoning of why it was essentially outlawed in the first place. And then Congress now voted to continue laws against marijuana and hemp. Now I bring up this piece of history just to show you that the U.S. government can do whatever the hell it wants. It can say that it's a terrible thing and outlaw it, and then when it needs it again, it can suddenly make it legal. So this is where we're at right now. I see it as being one plant, and the whole plant needs to be freed in its entirety. There are people who are using the plant for medicinal users, quite a few in this room in fact. There's people like myself who are using it recreationally. And then there's the part of the plant that is that was made in America, came from America, built America, and now in my opinion needs to be re-legalized so that we can compete on the world forum. So what I'm trying to say is you have to understand that marijuana is still unjustly a Schedule I illegal drug in this country because its non-THC carrying cousin, industrial hemp, is oil. Think about this. Why is industrial hemp still illegal to be grown in this country in the year 2012? We have a $9.6 trillion deficit, and with one sign of the pen, President Obama we could be raking in billions of dollars while cleaning up the planet and growing our own oil. So it seems like something we should all be able to agree on. Re-legalizing industrial hemp in this country could be the cash crop America's looking for. It's a $1 billion crop with 25,000 uses. It can make everything from dynamite to hempcrete for building to cellophane. Add to those dollars the $6.2 billion raised yearly if you tax marijuana like alcohol and tobacco, and the $8 billion in savings revenue when you stop arresting people, and the $7 billion that would be created in America, pot entertainment / hospitality, and you've got yourself a real stimulus package, Mr. Obama. Obama could be the first U.S. president to take credit for this amazing crop by re-legalizing the very plant that helped build America in the first place. I'd like you to imagine no more oil wars. And also to understand who's getting rich off of these foreign oil wars. Who's paying for them with their lives? We are. Believe me, hemp is more dangerous to the federal government than medical marijuana has ever been. Too many people in this country are staying wealthy by keeping hemp illegal, but the ones suffering are you and me. If you look to history, you'll understand why, even though a majority of voters are now in favor of marijuana legalization, our government is still arresting 850,000 people a year over a damn plant. A plant, by the way, we've been so unkind, so unjust to this plant. This is a plant that's been, Dr. Andrew Weil describes it as the dog of the plant world. It's followed us around, making itself useful to us from the beginning of mankind as food, as fiber, as fuel, and medicine. A plant, by the way, that's never killed anyone. So the American drug war has been the costliest war in American history, with over $1 trillion spent. So I'm suggesting a war that we can win. A war that helps the American people instead of harms them. A war on bad schools, a war on poverty, a war on hunger. Here's a checklist of the money that will be raised, Mr. President, if you re-legalize the growth of industrial hemp in America and re-legalize medical marijuana, tax and regulate it like alcohol. The government spends $8.7 billion enforcing marijuana laws each year. Mr. President said himself, when I was a kid, I inhaled frequently. That was the point. But today, if a young African American were to get busted for pot possession, there goes the college scholarships due to these unjust and racist laws for marijuana possession. So I see a lot of hypocrisy there for Mr. Obama personally. You would save $7.7 billion that the government is currently spending on prohibition. Taxation and regulation of cannabis, similar to alcohol, would produce combined savings in tax revenue of between $10 billion and $14 billion. You'll save all the cost of prosecution and defense of accused offenders, and hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue that would be generated if drugs were legal and taxed. So even a stoner can see that this all adds up to a pretty huge number. And you have to look to history. And it's time to get mad. You know, only when you get mad and you see this injustice. And this is why I like to tell people about the history of hemp. If they understand the history of hemp, it helps you have your argument in place about marijuana re-legalization in this country. And to understand that there have been powerful special interests involved, just like there are today. There have been for over 80 years. And you need to be able to wade through that to understand, you know, how am I most effectively going to be able to hear my voice, make my voice heard, and get the change that I need. So I'm hoping everybody gets mad enough to protect patients' rights and stop penalizing dispensaries in states like Montana that pass medical marijuana laws with 81% of the vote. So Mr. President, if you keep trumping state laws, you laid the seedlings of civil strife. You endorsed gay marriage because you know it's ridiculous to be legally married in Vermont and not recognized as married in Tennessee. Well, it's the same thing with marijuana. You need to get mad enough to fight for clean energy in the form of hemp methanol. Mad enough to understand what a civil liberty is and that it needs protecting. What I do in the privacy of my own home to recreate what I put in my body is none of your business. The cannabis sativa plant could once again be the key strategic and economic commodity of our time. It's one plant. It must be freed in its entirety to once again serve us as fuel and medicine. Once freed, it can help rebuild America economically. So I'd like to see you stop creating crimes in this country in order to punish them, Mr. President. I'd like to see you stop creating crimes in this country in order to profit from them. So yes, I've seen the future, and it's in the past. Let's go back to growing our own fuel. Let's go back to growing our own medicine. Let us enjoy the pursuit of happiness unencumbered by your special interests. Let us be free to enjoy the weed God put here for us to enjoy. God bless.
Butts. I am co-president and board chair of the Alabama Medical Marijuana Coalition. We are a nonprofit organization. We're based in Coleman, Alabama. Our primary goal is to obtain safe access for patients in Alabama who can benefit from the use of marijuana. I was asked here to speak today about my experience with pain pill addiction and marijuana to handle that addiction. And I intend to do just that, but I would be negligent not to thank the people that invited us here today. It means entirely, it is huge for me. I really appreciate it. It's huge for our organization. It lets the people in our organization know that what we're doing is not being ignored. If people outside the state are seeing what we're doing, we can say with relative certainty that the people inside the state of Alabama can see what we're doing. And it just means so much to me that I really appreciate you guys inviting us over here. A little background on me, Sabrina touched on it. I'm actually 43 years old. I need to update the website. I'm 43 years old. I'm a father of 3. I am a Christian, and I'm probably more conservative than anybody in this room. It's just the way it is. Maybe not Paul. Okay. I am a professional in the printing industry for longer than I care to admit. I'm a chronic pain patient, and I am a former legal pain pill addict. I suppose you could say once an addict, always an addict, like an alcoholic. I do still carry a couple prescriptions. I don't have immediate access to them. My wife does. And honestly, there are 3 or 4 episodes a year that I have with my back that the marijuana is just not enough. In 1992, I suffered a fall of about 18 feet and I landed sitting. I got a spinal compression injury in my neck and my lower back. And my course of treatment was pills. Lots of pills. All the pills. I had pain pills that, started out pretty mild. They weren't enough, so they continually got stronger and stronger. The prescriptions continually changed. It was over a 5.5-year period. I was an addict. And I never really knew it. What I know today that I didn't know then was that I was given a choice. You suffer with this, or you become an addict. Those were the decisions I was given. I never took anything that wasn't prescribed to me. I took only my prescriptions. I took it as it was prescribed. And after 5.5 years of pain pills, muscle relaxers, anti-inflammatories, NSAIDs, and everything that goes along with that, because you have to have a pill because this pill does that, right? So before I knew it, I was taking 10 or 12 pills a day. You do the math on that. That's 300 or 400 pills a month. After 5.5 years, I was an addict. I was very fortunate to have a doctor who was a man's man. He was a former Navy doctor. I could talk to him like a man. The downside was if you needed bedside manner, he had the bedside manner of a billy goat. He was. If you needed coddling, he was not the doctor for you. But you hear about pain pill addiction all the time, but it's always famous people, right? You've got Rush Limbaugh, you've got Brett Favre, you've got Jamie Lee Curtis, you've got Senator John McCain's wife, Cindy McCain, admitted pain pill addict. You don't hear about people like me. You don't hear about the press room manager, or you just don't hear about regular people. You hear about all the famous people that are in the media all the time, and they come clean, hey, I'm a pain pill addict. Well, it happens to us too. I walked in my doctor's office, I guess I had an epiphany. I had an epiphany that I was an addict. I decided that I was through being an addict. And about a year after California passed their medical marijuana law, I walked in my doctor's office and told him I was an addict, and he had helped get me there. I told him that I had taken notice when California had passed their medical marijuana law. I knew marijuana from my high school days. It was something I left behind when I started a family. But I was willing to go and try that. My pain pill addiction had affected every relationship in my life. It had affected my marriage. I lost that. It had affected my job at that time. I lost that too. It destroyed relationships with my 3 children, or two children at the time. My son's only 11. Since then, using marijuana in an edible form, that's the way I use it, and I'll get to that in just a second. I'm not the same person I was when I was taking the narcotics that I was being given freely. But in 1997, I walked in there, and I told him I was an addict, told him that I had looked into this and that I was planning on trying marijuana as my pain management. And he told me his problem was smoking. He said, I don't want you breathing the raw combusted product of anything. I don't care what the substance is, smoking's bad. Now, since we've heard some research that says maybe not so much. But, kicking my pain pills, smoking was beneficial to me. It was immediate. I woke up every morning and I was going through withdrawal symptoms. I needed that pill. It was torture. Every morning I woke up, I needed that pill right now. But once I started using the marijuana, and when I would get that feeling, I could smoke part of a joint, and for 2 hours I didn't have to use that pill. Now, that only lasted so long before you really got in trouble, start throwing up, and all that. But the immediate effects of smoking marijuana most certainly were beneficial to me in getting my pain pill addiction under control. I spoke a little bit about the relationships that I've destroyed. Now I'm a member of a church and have been for years. I took a beating in the church, man. It was, but I also had some that sent me private messages or talked to me alone, and were supportive of what I was doing. They weren't sure that they could do so, come out in public in Alabama and say, hey, I use marijuana every day. But a lot of my church family left me behind. My Facebook, gone. They're not friends on Chris's Facebook, I'll tell you that right now. But 15 years ago, I was headed to disability. I was going to be, you guys were going to be paying me. It wasn't because I couldn't physically do my job, it was because the pills I was taking had me so underwater, I couldn't mentally do my job. For years now, my job has been delegating duties. And if I can't remember what needs to be done today, that's real tough to do. I didn't keep up here. Give me just a second.
You're doing all right.
Okay. During my research, after I talked to my doctor and told him that I was going to try marijuana, it was something I knew. It had never led me to the place I was on that day. I did a little research, and lo and behold, the cannabis plant was used to help people from opium addiction back in the 20s. How about that? We got recent research that bears that out. 2008, 2009, 2010. We've all had research come out that said that it helps with, as an exit drug from opiate pain pill addiction, heroin, alcohol. It's a great exit drug. We knew this years ago. We knew this 100 years ago. And this medicine was snatched away from us. Here in 1940-ish, we pulled it out of the U.S. pharmacopoeia. It was no longer in the list of our physician's toolbox. And later on in the late 60s, we take it away from the world. I know there's a lot that goes into it, but I'd love to see cancer rates prior to marijuana being illegal and now. There's a lot of facets that would have to be taken into account there. but I imagine that it would be very interesting to look at. So for 15 years now, I've used marijuana primarily in an edible form. It started out rough. My wife, DJ, I'm remarried. I'm gainfully employed. I've repaired the relationships with my children. And I'm never going back. I use an edible product. I'm not saying that I won't smoke marijuana, because I will, if I'm invited. But I'm not taking 4 Oxycontins or 4 somas a day, and 4 somas a day. My only problem is my home state of Alabama considers me a criminal. And, you know, we're looking to change that. Ron and I have made a lot of progress in Alabama, and we intend to continue to make progress, because we're not going away. We're not hiding from anybody. And that's our biggest stumbling block. Everybody in this room knows it. You guys are willing to come in a public venue, show your face, and say, hey, I'm all for marijuana. There are so many people that aren't. There are so many people that are scared to death, and for good reason. The illegality of marijuana puts that fear into you. But I think the tipping point's here. You know, we've got 30% of the country has a medical marijuana law on the books. 2 states have legalized recreational use, kind of. So in closing, I'm Chris. I'm a former legal addict, but I found a way past it. I don't need help. I'm not an addict. I found help. I found it in a plant called cannabis. I make no assertions that marijuana use will help with any given ailment. All I know is what I've learned from personal experience and from those that I have close personal ties to. I'm a medical marijuana advocate. I'm an activist. And I believe that every person, regardless of their geological placement, should be able to use this plant as medicine. And they should be afforded that liberty. I believe that a patient's course of treatment should be determined between a patient and a doctor. I don't believe there should be intrusion by any government entity or corporate power. I'm a patient, I'm a marijuana user, and I'm not apologetic.
Yeah.
Much love, you guys.
So I am from Texas, like Sabrina
Thanks
said.
everybody
and
for
it is
coming.
quite a
Thanks for
challenge
having
there.
me.
I don't know if you guys face some of the same challenges, but I think part of the reason that we can help be a model is we're closed off to many of the avenues that some of the successful areas are dealing with. How many of you have ballot initiatives? I know there's a couple in the South. Nobody. So you're all dealing with the same thing that is that there.
This is Arkansas.
Oh, no, Arkansas, right. What about, can you change laws on a local level? Can you, as your city or your county, make a change? So some of you can. We can't in Texas. We formerly had been able to until a group right outside of Austin tried to pass a medical marijuana initiative on their own for their city, and there was a big backlash, and now we have a state law that says all drug laws must be applied at the state level. So there's no deprioritization, there's no ticket, nothing, we can't even propose it. So that's part of what I want to talk about is these challenges and how we've dealt with them. Sorry, my stuff's in the wrong order now. That's what I was asking for my stand. Okay. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so another problem that we have as far as this process, we have to go through the legislator. We have to vote. We have to be in contact with our legislators, and they are only in session a very short time. They meet for 120 days every other year. So That's the amount of time that we have the thousands of bills that come through our legislator for them to review, for us to talk to them about as citizens, not just a marijuana decrim bill or an affirmative defense medical bill, which is all we have an opportunity at right now, but for everything. So I think that part of our process is understanding that our legislators, while they're not doing what we want, it's not entirely because they don't want to. It's they're dealing with prioritizing, are we going to deal with this issue of children being ID'd with tags and everybody's upset about that? What are they going to prioritize? So I think getting people educated about their process in your state is priority number one, and NORML is an educational nonprofit. So we have focused a lot of our efforts on education. Granted, we still do, we're in Austin, we do lots of music events, but I consider that to be fundraising. That's what helps us do these big projects that we're trying to educate people with. Mostly the people that attend the music events are already on our side. So we need to be talking to people in our community, and we need to be educating our members. Part of the way that we did that initially was to put together an activist training guide, which we publish, we have at our meetings, we talk about it, it's always available, and we update it every year. We do that to tell people how to find out who represents them, give them the website, spoon feed them basically. Find out who represents you. Here's how to call them. Here's how to email them or write them. How to go visit them. Some tips on all of those things, some do's and don'ts. So educating our members on that basis, but also clarifying some of the, I don't know if you have any laws or avenues that people don't realize, don't know everything about. We definitely do, and we hear a lot of, why don't we just do ballot initiatives? Why don't we collect signatures? Why don't we prioritize for Austin? And they're all avenues we've checked into and we know for sure we cannot do. So we waste a lot of time, and our members waste a lot of time thinking that we can do things we can't. And there's at least 3 or 4 that we can easily clarify. We have a cite and release statewide law for marijuana possession, but that does not change the penalties in any way. People hear, oh, you can get a ticket. Yeah, you can get a ticket. That's a summons for you to go to court and face all the same repercussions as you would if you had been arrested. You just don't get arrested. It was actually pushed forward by Mothers Against Drug Drivers. It has nothing to do with the marijuana itself. It has to do with them wanting the police on the streets. So it actually makes it easier for them to give you the ticket. You still face everything. But we have a lot of people that think that means, oh, well, I'm not going to go to jail, so it's just a ticket. It's not. So we use that activist guide to also clarify those things and put people in the right direction using the resources that we have and the research we've already done. So I think that's very important. Like I said, we have to go through our legislator. We're a large state. Texas is huge. We have these very rural areas that aren't very heavily populated at all. So East Texas, West Texas, North and South, our chapters are only centrally located. And since we can only change laws on a state level, how do we get those people involved when we don't have chapters there? And there's really not even enough people in East or West Texas to be involved and set one up. So we do the activist training guide, we distribute that, but we also do an activist training day where we bring people in, and it's free, and we do it at a library or a bookstore, and we have speakers, and we just educate them a little further on the process. So that's part of what we're doing, and I have copies of this if you guys want to kind of model after it, just a little, how to call, write your representative. And then the next thing that we did for the first time this year, we did a voter's guide. So we put together all the information, email addresses, contact information for all our representatives and senators, which was actually a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. They do not want you to know their email address unless you are their constituent. So we only ended up finding about half of the candidates. So next year, or for the statewide one next time, we'll put a little more time into it.
That's only true in Texas.
Well, I'm saying be aware of what you might run into, basically, when you're trying to put this information together. We go to our legislator's website, and you have to put in your address if you want to email them, because they're going to check and make sure that you should actually be talking to them. So going by that, what we wanted to do was try to direct people to their own representative and senator, because really that's where they're going to make the most impact anyway. But we did do a little voter's guide where we asked several questions, and I only have one copy of that, but basically we asked the questions about whether they would support legalization, medical, and affirmative defense for medical, which is what we have every year that comes up, further research, the legalization of hemp, and decriminalization, legalization. We just asked those few questions, and we got a good response, and we distributed this. So our members, I think, felt a little more comfortable knowing the climate, the political climate that they're facing. And all of this was a big push, or leading up to our big push, which is the legislators' education package. So not only do we have to educate our members, we really have to educate our lawmakers, but approach it in a way that's not condescending or negative or telling them they're idiots or making it personal. You may feel that way, and a lot of things they say may sound that way, but pointing it out to them is not really going to get you anywhere. Or dressing in a chicken suit and blocking their doorway, or any of that. So I think it's important to keep in mind and to model that for your members and supporters, that this is your lawmaker's job. Whatever they're doing that you don't like may not be personal at all. It may have influence from other people. It may just be they want to keep their job and they're afraid to do what you want. So how do we get over all that? I think through educating them and creating a conversation amongst themselves, their peers, and with their constituents. So we spent a lot of time and put together this. It's really only 6 pages for them to read. We hope they'll read at least the first page. And I know some people want to use this as a model. I can give it to you online, but I brought copies for everybody. If you want one, I can hand it out to you. So basically what we did is just a little summary sheet on the first page. We hope that they read that at least. It tells them who we are, what we want, and what's contained within, and just kind of some strong points from each section. And then we did a section on decrim, the facts surrounding it, what it would help in Texas, and the action we want them to take, which is a decrim bill that's been put out there every session and never makes it out of committee. It would do nothing more than lower the penalties up to 1 ounce to an actual ticket. So that's what we're really pushing for, and what we're doing with it is we've printed them all nice like this, but we're trying to get as many of our supporters and members to deliver to their own representatives to make the biggest impact. So we're coordinating that effort, getting information from people, telling them who their rep is, and then trying to advise them along the way of what to be prepared for. I personally have already delivered mine to my senator and representative staff, and I got a fairly good reaction. I mean, it's looking a little better in Texas, I think, as far as creating that conversation, which is even a hard first step. But I think this is going to help. We in our very first paragraph in that, we tell them all 181 senators and representatives will be receiving this. So I hope that in that they're going to create a conversation also amongst themselves. But most importantly, they are totally uneducated in a lot of these aspects. They don't. I met with obviously the aides of my representatives, but they had no idea about. They didn't know it was classified like heroin. They didn't know hemp was illegal too. You know, you think about how many, I mean, there are thousands of bills that come out that cross these people's desks. You have to bring it to their attention. Just the lawmaker putting it forward, at least for us, we have these 2 representatives that put together a bill and submit it every session, but nothing happens with it. Well, nothing's going to happen with it until they get more people calling their office and contacting them about it. And I also, when I did speak with with their staff, with my lawmaker staff, I brought along a personal story of someone that I know is being affected. I don't really have a personal story as far as being arrested or affected in that way, and I thought this story was more impactful, especially with my senator staff, because she's also in their district. And it's just a woman that, I don't mean just a woman, but it's a woman that has had her children taken away by CPS for testing positive in the hospital. So I spoon-fed this to our members. I did a summary for them. I attached a complaint form with CPS. I tried to put it out there for them, but I also brought it to my lawmakers' attention that this is what's happening in your district, in your state. And so I feel like it's a full circle effort. You know, you educate the members, you educate the lawmakers, and then you make the connection between the two and get them together and try to create that business-like approach where you have the person that's in charge and the person that wants a change, and they're meeting together and they're discussing it. They're not yelling or making it personal between each other. And I think that's incredibly important if we ever want to get a change made. So, thank you for having me.
How many of you in here have given testimony to your state legislatures? Just raise your hand. Okay, good. I'll tell you, if you've done that, then you might be equipped for the challenge to speak for only 15 minutes on cannabis, which is what I've been asked to do here today. But it's often a luxurious amount of time in front of a legislature. So I'm going to run through the presentation we gave this past April. This is a very complex issue. You have to be able to condense it in a way that busy legislators can process. And in my opinion, as an epidemiologist, you're required to give them a sense of the big picture on this issue. So I'm fortunate to have been able to testify before our state legislature now for 5 years running. So we have developed a relationship that has been useful. And so for the presentation in April, I started off, yes.
Can you see the mic there so people that
Need me to be louder,
Yes.
honestly?
Yes, there are people with hearing difficulties.
Okay, well, let's make sure is this better than I was?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well.
It's better, it's just more of
Embrace technology. Embrace it.
Well, 4 minutes into my time slot, we'll get started here. Speaking to our legislature in April, we started by letting them know what had happened since the last time we'd spoken before. So we said since 2010, as of that point, 2 other states had legalized medical cannabis programs. I think now we're up to 18 states. The VA had made a decision to allow VA patients to use medical cannabis without penalty in states where it was legal. The National Cancer Institute had acknowledged formally and on their website the numerous benefits of medical cannabis use. Another over 4,000 peer-reviewed medical journal articles had appeared in the previous 2 years on cannabis. 4 U.S. state governors had petitioned the Department of Justice to reclassify 70 to 80%, and now I guess we're up to 86% in the latest survey of U.S. adults support medical cannabis. And our bill, the Tennessee Safe Access to Medical Cannabis Bill, passed in Washington State. We actually could update this now. We provided a copy of our bill to the country of Uruguay, and it appears to have had some influence on the direction they're taking. Having talked, though, about what had happened in the previous 2 years, there's certain things we reviewed with the legislature that haven't changed at all in all of our discussion around access to medical cannabis. And first and foremost is the issue of safety. Marijuana is one of the safest therapeutically active substances known to man. It's capable of relieving the distress of great numbers of very ill people and doing so with safety under medical supervision. It has currently accepted medical use and treatment. There's no lack of accepted safety for it under medical supervision. And the spokesperson for all of those conclusions was the DEA's own administrative law judge, Francis Young, in 1988. As far as efficacy goes, again, we're bringing old news. We're reviewing old news with you, legislature. 24,000 articles published in the last 20 years on cannabis and cannabinoids. The conditions for which it has demonstrated use are numerous. The anti-emetic or nausea reduction properties, appetite stimulant, analgesic, mediating the progression of disease. That's a very exciting area for a number of very serious conditions. Its antidepressant properties, antispasmodic properties, its function as a vasodilator. Again, the anti-tumor properties are very exciting. And as you can see, even on this quick summary, I've run out of space for some other conditions like the substitution usage of cannabis to address other serious addictions. We probably could go on another page. The issue of effectiveness is key. With this legislative group, I didn't have time to show this slide, but I wanted to show it to you. There are 2 or 3 excellent papers out now that review the placebo-controlled double-blind studies that have been done. This is one from Europe, reviewing 37 separate randomized clinical trials for the conditions we're familiar with. There's the conclusion. Cannabinoids exhibit a strong therapeutic potential, mainly as analgesics, appetite stimulants, as well as in the treatment of MS. And the therapy was well tolerated. Side effects were minimal and in the main not serious, included dizziness, dry mouth, sleepiness, and increased appetite. So when people say, well, and I summarize it by saying, hungry, happy, and horny. But, if you're sick, none of those are a problem. But again, rather than stumbling around this issue of where's the research, put it foursquare in front of them. And again, this is just one of the papers we shared with our legislature. Our own bill, Tennessee Safe Access to Medical Cannabis. What did we mean by that? By safe, we meant grown, processed, and packaged under rigorous and reliable standards. Access, available as soon as patients needed it, for as long as they needed it, with approval from their health provider. Our law does not require that you apply to the Department of Health to be approved before you access it. We want you to get it as soon as your doc thinks you need it. What do we mean by medical? The cannabis would be used for serious conditions for which medical benefits are well documented. And by cannabis, we meant, in the context of this bill, select varieties of known chemical composition standardized to allow their reliable use for discrete and targeted medical purposes. That's our bill. How would the bill operate? Rather than asking a single state agency to sort of, backdoor passive-aggressive involvement in a program, we wanted to engage 3 separate state agencies actively in our program. So for our bill, cannabis production would occur by licensed farmers trained, supervised, and monitored by our Department of Agriculture. By the way, in Tennessee, our Department of Agriculture remains our biggest friend on a medical cannabis bill, and they're an entity many of you may not have spoken with. Processing in our bill, licensed processors would be supervised, monitored, and overseen by the Board of Pharmacy. And our regulated dispensaries and the patient registry would be supervised, monitored, and overseen by our Department of Health, who, by the way, is our least friendly agency in this state. Our goals are pretty straightforward. We want our patients to be able to access medical cannabis as soon as they're eligible, for as long as they're eligible, without delay. The medical cannabis made available to them through our program should be of consistent, high quality, safe, effective, and inexpensive. And the production, processing, and distribution of our cannabis should occur under tightly controlled conditions. If you're speaking in the South, you're going to get a lot of blowback on California, on laissez-faire administration of programs. We definitely had to position ourselves in a way that addressed that issue. We were very restrictive in our definition of eligibility. Cancer, hepatitis C, MS, HIV, epilepsy, glaucoma, severe debilitating and chronic pain, which we defined as truly debilitating, that would be at a level where you would be disabled, considered disabled. Oops, oh my God. Severe nausea, Crohn's disease, Alzheimer's, ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, wasting syndrome, and finally, any person diagnosed with another condition but that qualified them for end-of-life hospice care. Program revenues. this definitely got our legislators sitting up in their seat. Our goal is to produce medical cannabis that's not $300 to $400 an ounce, but is $60 to $75 an ounce. Patients are not getting this covered by insurance. We don't need to be adding a ridiculous financial burden to access a plant or plant matter. The division of our income would be as follows: 40% to the licensed farmer, and by the way, that would work out at this pricing level, 60 to 75. That's $500 a pound to the farmer. 20% to the processor, 20% to the dispensary, and later to the pharmacist, and 20% to the Safe Access program itself. Folks, this is the most taxed model that's been presented in the country so far. 20% of every dollar coming back to the state, initially to cover all costs for administration of the program, but with the income levels we're proposing, very soon to bring monies into the state far in excess of what it takes to run the program, monies that we were dedicating to substance abuse treatment and indigent health care. So that's where our excess monies would go. According to the state's own fiscal review process, they estimated the program would be generating around $170 million a year in sales, of which $34 million will come back to the Safe Access program. We actually think that the state's estimate is wrong by a factor of 3. We think within 3 to 5 years, with only 15% of the eligible patients enrolled, it'll be a $500 million a year program, of which the state would be receiving $100 million. Okay. We said to our legislature, we're not introducing anything new. We're just creating a safer process because patients are accessing cannabis now as we speak. And we look, as an epidemiologist, I couldn't help but look at the size of the eligible populations and then go to the literature for what portion of that group is considered to be using now. And there's quite a bit of literature out here on this. So we estimated, just looking at 4 of our 13 conditions, we might have over 25,000 people already using cannabis, but they're having to buy it from the streets, and they have no idea what they're buying, or consistency, safety kinds of issues. By the way, our legislature really responded to this. They know people are using cannabis now for these conditions. They just didn't have a sense of the numbers. And these are just 4 of the 13 conditions. So the actual numbers of patients in Tennessee using now may approach 100,000 people, who again are buying it on the streets, basically. I ended by sharing with them, and these quotes are too long, but just in the 6 months or so before I presented, the Mayo Clinic did an excellent article that basically just made fun of how ridiculous our continued prohibitionist policies are in the face of the multitude of medical evidence that we have. And in fewer words, the editorial board of the New England Journal of Medicine said and published, "It is time for authorities to rescind their prohibition of the medical use of marijuana for seriously ill patients and allow physicians to decide which patients to treat." Now, given our legislature and most of your conservative legislatures, this was a good point to end on, and will continue to be. It's from the 10th Amendment Center. And basically oops, I've done it again. Basically, what the 10th Amendment Center has said to its conservative audience is that if you're concerned about federal overreach, medical marijuana programs demonstrate that nullification works, that states can tell the feds within certain parameters that we want to move in a direction contrary to federal law and succeed in doing that. Okay, thank you folks for indulging my inability to keep this in front of my face. If I could, just 2 more things to wrap up. We produced 5 separate handouts for our legislature, including fiscal impact, an overview a 7-page summary of what patients have already said to us about their use in the state, quotes from those patients, and 2 sets of overheads like this. I've made enough so that every state should have a copy of those. Please see me afterwards. And let me end by saying, as our Alabama speaker said earlier, you know, illegitimate power stays in control when the people don't stand up and speak. The DEA did me a great service by raiding my farm because it allowed me finally to get up and speak truth and to continue to speak it. I've applied to be the first federal medical marijuana convict to receive a presidential pardon. No one ever has yet. I was required to submit 3 letters of support with the application. We submitted 174, including from 16 of the legislators I spoke with, Democrat and Republican. So if you have an opportunity, take it. We're right on the edge, folks, not just of changing our policies in this country, but as a species, changing our relationship with this plant, and that's where we need to be. Thanks.
Remarks by Congressman Cohen to be read at the meeting of Tennessee NORML, December 15th, 2012. Thank you for inviting me to speak to your group, he says. I appreciate everything that NORML does to advance the cause of sensible marijuana policy. I want to particularly note the great work that Paul Kuhn does here in Nashville. Paul, would you raise your hand? And thank him for working with me when I was a state senator. Congressman Cohen has been working for marijuana reform here in Nashville for many, many years, and he's been a friend of ours for a long time. He's from the Memphis area. We have some representatives from Memphis here today, and we're glad to see you guys. This is the Memphis Cannabis Cooperative we have here.
The West Tennessee.
The West Tennessee Cannabis Cooperative. Welcome, guys. Keep voting for Senator Cohen, or Congressman Cohen, because he's leading the way up there. He says, I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person to talk with you, but I value the work you're all doing, and I wanted to let you know about some of my work in Congress on this important issue. I've been concerned for a long time about the direction of our drug policy, particularly with respect to marijuana. Our 40-year experiment with the so-called war on drugs has led to bulging prison populations, racial disparities, and a lost generation of people with no education or job prospects. Back when I was first starting my career in the 1970s as legal advisor to the Memphis Police Department, I worked to create a citation in lieu of arrest for certain nonviolent crimes. I did this with an eye toward stopping senseless arrests for marijuana possession. When I was in the Tennessee State Senate, I introduced legislation to make medical marijuana legal and worked to reduce the collateral consequences of a marijuana offense. Now that I'm in Congress, I've been working on several pieces of legislation that would bring some sanity to our national laws on marijuana. I've also pressed both the Bush and Obama administrations to make marijuana a much lower priority in law enforcement. Over time, more and more states will agree that medical marijuana can be useful as a tool to relieve the suffering of the seriously ill. For me, this is first and foremost an issue of compassion. He cites his dear friend Oral James Mitchell, a Navy SEAL who fought in Vietnam, developed pancreatic cancer, and withered away from a robust 210 pounds to just 115 pounds before he died. His 88-year-old mother said to me, "Thank God for the marijuana. It's the only thing that makes Oral smile or eat." It hasn't always been politically popular to speak out about creating a sensible drug policy, but I think the tide is beginning to turn. NORML is at the forefront of these efforts, and I appreciate the work that you do. I hope I'll be able to come visit you all in person soon and continue this conversation. Thank you.